knitting friends, knitting meetups, knitting community, knitting festivals, knit-alongs. It's already February, but I wanted to go through my list of 2024 knitting goals slash resolutions slash what am I trying to do this year with knitting. And I know this is a little bit late, but I was kind of trying to spend some time thinking about what are the things that really matter to me this year? What do I really want to focus on achieving? And generally the way that I try to set goals is having something be really specific and measurable. That's kind of like the classic SMART goal framework if you've ever used that. This year I feel like I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty good place with the knitting skills that I've gained, though I didn't really want to go that specific. So this year's set of goals is going to be a little bit looser and a little bit more like a general in and out list of what things do I want to focus on or not focus on. Let's go through the ins first. So number one is making things that fit. So this was a really big focus of mine last year, was learning how to grade patterns more efficiently, but I feel like through that process, I learned so much more about how to also just make something fit for myself. I think that the process of learning to grade more made me think a lot about how things are actually based on sizing charts. That's so obvious, but like, I don't know why this never really occurred to me. Like when you buy clothing that's ready-made in stores, you can just try it on and see if you like how it fits or not. But if you're investing on this time in making something beforehand, you really need to think about what is the fit that I like? How does my body differ from the standard sizing chart that they might be using? And if I look back on my 2023 knits, the things that I wasn't happy with were things generally where I just felt like the fit didn't end up being what I thought it would feel like in terms of like something feels too tight or something doesn't quite hit in the place that I want it to. So yeah, I think that that's just like the biggest in possible is like thinking about how the clothing that you wear will feel on your body. Basically like using all of these skills that I built last year to just put that to work and make designs that feel like they fit exactly how I want, and that I'm like empowering other people to make decisions of what fit they want on their bodies too. The next in for me is thoughtful finishing details. So I feel like I learned a few different techniques in the last year that just really make a big difference to me. One of them is double knitting. So using double knitting to make like finishing edges for button bands, etc. I'm wearing this Deuxième cardigan right now that's in testing, and I just think that it makes such a nice polished finish, and I think that's something that I'm going to be using on a lot more of my designs from now on. Another thing I just used on a cardigan is the Italian tubular bind off, which like I know everyone knows about it. It's not like I discovered these things, but personally I feel like I just didn't prioritize them for a while because I thought that it was like too fussy. But I do think that having those really nice finishing details just elevates a piece. So I want to spend a lot more time this year thinking about like being thoughtful about shaping, being thoughtful about finishing things in a really nice way. Even if it takes a little bit more effort, I think that having a finished piece that just feels so high quality makes me want to wear it more. So that's like a general in for me this year. The next one is finding creative uses for my stash yarn. So I'm sure that this is something that other people can relate to. I now have a stash that feels not overwhelmingly large, but like there's a lot, there's a lot there. This kind of snuck up on me because if you saw my video of unpacking it, I got a whole bunch of yarn last year from a friend of mine who was moving. So in the past, I felt like basically anything that came into my stash was something that I for sure had a project idea for. And then I suddenly had this big influx and I haven't really known exactly what to do with all of this yarn. The reason that I feel like I need some creative uses for it is that a lot of the yarn came from variety packs. So there's a lot of like 1 or 2 skeins per color. I tend to be a pretty like solid color girly. I don't wear a lot of patterns, I don't wear a lot of prints. And so I haven't really known what to do with like 1 to 2 skeins per color. I gave away or donated a lot of the yarn that I just knew off the bat the colors weren't really for me, but there's still quite a bit left over and I'd like to find good uses for it. A lot of that yarn is sock yarn, and I personally have never really gotten into sock knitting. I've used some of the like larger quantities, like this was using 1 strand of sock yarn held together with a mohair strand, and I had enough of the sock yarn to make an entire cardigan. So I'd like to find more uses for the large quantities of sock yarn, but I'd also like to think of ways that I could use the smaller quantities thoughtfully. So I'm not sure what that will look like because generally superwash yarn isn't the best for things like color work. So I think that finding ways to use this yarn will just kind of like push my creativity. So my next kind of general goal for the year is actually sort of in tension with the one that I last said. And by that, I mean, now I'm like, tension is such an overloaded word to use in the context of yarn, but I mean that it's like, you know, they might kind of be at odds with each other. And that is that I want to choose the right yarn for a project. So I feel like there were a couple of times last year, especially when I was designing my own thing, where I chose yarn that wasn't necessarily the best choice for the pattern that I wanted to make, but it was what I had on hand, and I was trying to make things from my yarn stash. So I think the biggest example for me on this one is my prep school pullover, which I knit using an Aran weight cotton yarn. I do think that like a cotton sweater is nice, and I do still wear that sweater, and I'm happy that I made it, but I kind of feel like it would have been more successful as a project and maybe also as a pattern if I'd used a wool yarn for my sample. Not as many people want a heavy cotton sweater opposed to like the number of people who might want the similar silhouette but in a wool. So I kind of regretted that project because I felt like it was me knitting from my stash because I was trying not to buy new yarn, but it didn't really do the silhouette and the pattern justice, I think. So that's just something that I think I need to be thoughtful about. And I think I need to really decide, like, I don't want to bring new yarn into my home for just like any old casual thing. But if I'm like really, really being thoughtful about a design I really have a specific vision for, then making sure that I'm choosing the right yarn that will like shine in that context versus just picking something from my stash. Another kind of like general ins potentially, one is drapiness. So I feel like early last year was all about negative ease for me. I know that I gravitate towards more like figure hugging designs, but you can see in my 2023 knits video, I was really unhappy with the negative ease and like the tightness of some of the things that I made that I just didn't feel worked quite right on me. So I think that I've learned a lot since then, and some of my favorite things that I've made lately, like my Ophelia blouse and this cardigan, both have like a smidge of positive ease, but I chose yarns that were drapier and that kind of like flow over your curves. And I'm really into that. So I feel like if I had to guess, this next year will involve a lot of positive ease and drapiness, whereas last year it felt like there was a lot of negative ease. And aside from my Prima pullover, where that fabric, like 2x2 rivet is a different story because it just has like such comfortable stretchiness to it. But I think that this year, if I had to guess, I think I'm gonna be gravitating more towards looser fitting things that maybe still show off your body if you want them to, but feel very easy to wear. And I don't think that super negative ease stockinette designs always feel easy to wear because they just feel more constrictive. The next one is color work. So I feel like seeing some other people talk about, is 2024 going to be like the year of color work, whereas last year a lot of the big designers were doing a lot of things with like textural stitch patterns, like the Ingrid sweater and sweater number 18, etc. So, you know, big designers like Petite Knit and My Favorite Things Knitwear have started releasing color work. So maybe I'm just like caught up in the zeitgeist, but I feel like personally I've gone through some like in and out phases of being really, really into color work. So I'm kind of feeling that like craving again a little bit. I think in the last few weeks, I've basically gotten addicted to like doodling and stitch fiddle because I have like 100 color charts in there. And that's been something that's been really fun for me personally. I think realizing the ways that knitting has like brought more creativity back into my life. I think that before I was knitting, I mean, I loved art growing up, and I feel like I kind of moved away from that for a while in my adulthood. And I think that knitting has like been this kind of perfect crossover of like some engineering, you know, construction, etc., and then also some creativity that has really just like sparked the joy in creating again for me. And so I feel like color work is kind of a fun way to challenge myself, to have more creativity and to express myself more. So that's like one element of it, is just creative expression. And then the second element is I feel like it would really challenge me to grow more as a knitter and as a designer. So here's a few reasons. One is that I think that having to be really thoughtful about your color choices in tandem with each other, if you're working on a project that has multiple colors, would just like force me to grow more in terms of like my understanding of color theory. And then two is in terms of construction. So I've generally gravitated towards a certain pattern of top-down construction where you work the back panel flat, you pick up the shoulder panels, you connect them all under the arms, and then you work in the round, or you work like flat back and forth, top down. I really haven't made many raglan sweaters, and I haven't made any circular yoke sweaters. And so I think that if I am challenging myself to come up with more color work patterns, that will really force me to investigate why I don't gravitate towards the raglan or circular yoke sweaters. And otherwise, it might also push me to get better at different techniques. Like for my tarot card sweater, that one really pushed me to get good at ladder back jacquard because I felt like that was the color work technique that made the most sense for it. So I think it's like a good knitting construction challenge too, is like having to think through, oh, well, if I'm really liking this design, how will I carry the yarn back and forth? What does that mean about the construction? What do I have to think about to like make this a fun knitting experience too, and not just like whatever the end result will be. The next one is lace. I dipped a toe into lace last year. I just think there's more there. I just think it's pretty. That's it. That's really not that deep. The very last in that I'm gonna put is just community. I think the community in knitting in general has just been such a bright spot, and like something that I really wasn't anticipating when I first learned to knit alone from YouTube in lockdown was how great this hobby would be for making me feel connected to other people and inspired by other people. And I just want more of that. I mean, that's not surprising. Like, that is why I made my Instagram account in the first place, was I wanted to talk about knitting with more people, and then same for making a YouTube. So I just want even more community in this upcoming year. So I guess that will probably mean more knitting meetups, going to Rhinebeck again, maybe doing a knit along. I think especially when I was at Rhinebeck, I was like looking at all these other people who were wearing similar things to each other, and I felt a little bit of FOMO of like, I want to like roll up with a crew of knitting friends and feel like we all had this like shared experience together. So maybe a knit along, whether that's like having my own or joining someone else's. I just want more community in general, more knitting friends, knitting meetups, knitting community, knitting festivals, knit alongs. Sorry, I'm like addicted to doing that. Like
receipts, proof, timeline, screenshot.
Anyway, but that's like how I will cap off this general things that I'm craving in 2024. Okay, we've got the ins. Now let's go through what is out for me in 2024. Number one, tendonitis. So, I mean, maybe anyone who has gone into some knitting binges can relate to this, but I definitely go through these phases where I just get like addicted to working on a specific project. I just want to keep knitting, and then I end up like overexerting my body, basically. This happened to me really badly over Christmas. I had COVID over Christmas. Knitting while watching movies felt like the only like cozy thing I could have during the holidays. So I just went so overboard, and honestly, I like hurt myself through it. I just had to stop knitting for like a few weeks after that. I do think that I have like a relatively ergonomic setup, and that I try to find, you know, a seat with neck support, and I prop up my elbows and stuff, but like there is just a point at which your body is like, girl, you're making me do this like one tiny thing 5,000 times a day. Like, it's gonna hurt. Like, your body's not meant for that. So this year I wanna be really good about setting myself reasonable limits in terms of, you know, stretching every 30 minutes. And like, by that I mean a full body stretch, like get up, fully stretch it all out, maybe get on the floor, do some yoga stretches. There's no way that my body at least can just like sit for like 3 hours straight doing this tiny repetitive motion and not get a little worn down. So that's a big out for me this year. I don't want to have any repetitive stress injuries. I am good once I start to feel it come on to like taking a step back from knitting and not aggravating it, but I just don't want to put myself in that position where I'm feeling pain from doing something that I liked too much. The next out for me is casting on new designs that I'm not absolutely in love with. I am like very much a person who fidgets via knitting. Whenever I'm just hanging out, I would rather do it with knitting. I'd rather watch a movie with knitting. If I don't have knitting or something to do with my hands, I start like picking at my cuticles and doing other like little self-destructive or distracting fidget behaviors. But I feel like I kind of got into this cycle last year where I would be in between two projects and I would feel like I needed to cast on a new design right away because I wanted something to do with my hands. I have a very finite amount of like patience and brain power that I feel like I want to put into the sort of, to me, less fun elements of creating a design. So figuring out all of the math for like 8 to 15 sizes, figuring out all of the formatting of how do you kind of organize this in a readable way that's not like 50 million pages long. Those are like the least fun parts for me. And so I think that I burn myself out on doing those by constantly being like, oh, I want to cast on just so I can knit through this movie. Let me do a bunch of math before that. I like use up the amount of spreadsheet knitting time on my new thing instead of devoting that to like finishing the pattern for my old thing. So what does this mean for me? I think I want to find some kind of like interstitial projects that I can insert in between like the designs that I really care about. Maybe socks will be that kind of project, maybe other accessories, maybe picking out some more patterns from other people, maybe picking some projects that will take me longer because they're with a thinner weight yarn. That's something that I liked about this project and my Ophelia blouse, especially the Ophelia blouse is knit in fingering weight. It took me longer and I got more knitting time out of the amount of like brain power I had to use to create the design. My last out for 2024 is viewing gauge swatches as a chore. So this was something that I feel like I had a complete mind shift about in the last year. I truly used to think that gauge swatches were just like a barrier between me and my future project. I have to do it to get the right fit, and that's a chore because something you have to do that you don't want to is a chore. But I feel like I somehow tricked my brain in the last year into like totally changing the narrative of the gauge swatch. And I think this was when I made like a whole mood board in my office / craft room. And I went around and I like collected all of the gauge swatches that I had made over the last year. And some of them had actually ended up becoming projects that I loved. Some of them still are like a project I'm thinking about, but I haven't committed to yet. And I just felt so inspired seeing them and viewing them as like, I don't know, a little promise, I guess. I made a story about this on my Instagram. I'll like put it in here, but I refer to this as my like earnest era, you know, of this like how special to make this little thing that you can hold in your hands that will become this future object that you don't even know yet, but you get to know it a little bit early. You get like a preview of it. And I had a lot of people message me being like, wait, why does this make me feel so emotional? And yeah, I don't know. I think there is something emotional to it. And like that, changing that narrative of it made me feel really differently towards them. I also, from that, I was like, am I using the word earnest right? Which I don't know why. Every now and then I get self-conscious that I'm like, does this word mean what I think it means? Which I just meant like sincerity, but I learned another definition for the word earnest, which I thought was really interesting, which is a thing intended or regarded as a sign or promise of what is to come, which like literally is a gauge swatch. So I really loved that. And that is how I choose to view all of my gauge swatches from now on. I also used to unravel them, but I think there is something really sweet and special about holding on to it. I've seen some people make gauge swatch bags, cardigans, blankets, etc. I think that's a really cool idea of something you could do with them, but it just feels like this like very sweet souvenir of like a specific snapshot in time before you made the thing or when you were thinking about making it. I also feel like sometimes I get a little bit of like cast-on-itis where I just really, really want to start casting things on. I get really excited about a new idea, a new yarn, whatever. And I think that a gauge swatch helps me like mitigate that, where I can use that new stitch pattern or cast on that yarn. And then I get a little bit of like instant gratification of being able to hold this thing and imagine the full thing without having to do the full commitment of like dropping my work in progress and beginning something totally new. And there are things that I've made a swatch for that I made the swatch like 2 years ago and I kind of forget about it. And then every time I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be really cute. Like it gives me kind of an anchor for that like perhaps fleeting inspiration. It lets me hold on to it concretely. And like when I see it on my mood board, I'm like, oh yeah, there's something there. So I don't know. 2024, I'm no longer viewing them as chores. I'm viewing it as a special small promise that you can hold in your hands ahead of time. A little glimpse of the future. And then, okay, I guess my final out is continuing to work on things that I don't love. So I think basically just like I'm out is holding on to guilt about something that you're making, holding on to guilt in general. I just think life is too short to spend your precious time on something that you're not getting what you want out of. I think that there were a few projects in the last year where I kind of knew that I wasn't loving it, but I felt like I had to finish it through so that like, I don't know, I wouldn't feel like it was wasted time or people wouldn't be disappointed in me, like that I was not showing up with a finished object, I guess. And I just don't think that's the right way to go about life. In my experience, whenever I've left something, if there really was something there and it's something I want to wear, or it was something that was like creatively important to me, I'll come back to it. And if not, then it just like wasn't the right project for me in the first place. And that's been pretty universally true. And there might be some projects that just feel good to knit and you know you're not going to wear it, and that's also fine. You're getting something out of it. But I want to move on from things that I'm just not feeling. I think when I'm back in Vermont, I want to do like a spring cleaning and kind of go through all of my works in progress and kind of decide, am I getting something out of this that I want? And if not, frog it. So those are my major, not necessarily resolutions, but intentions that I'm setting for this year, of things that I want to focus my energy on and things that I want to move away from or find ways to rebalance in my life and in my creating. I'd love to know if any of these resonate with you or not. And if you have any goals or intentions that you've set for yourself, I'd love to know what they are, because I'm also not opposed to amending my goals throughout the year. I mean, I guess I already added a new one in while filming this video, but I don't know, it's just nice to be inspired by other people too. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you again soon. And I forget, I think I never said this at the beginning. I'm Tamara, and I design knitwear and post any content on here and on my Instagram. Okay, bye.